In 1 minute, the Mafia boss was shocked. Victor Constantine's empire was hemorrhaging millions, and nobody could find a wound. 20 of the most elite financial experts in Chicago locked in a war room for 3 days straight, producing nothing but theories and excuses while the money kept disappearing into shadows. The conference room at the upscale restaurant smelled like desperation and cold coffee. Expensive suits wrinkled from sleepless nights. Brilliant minds failing spectacularly, while Victor's patience evaporated like water on hot asphalt. Maya Torres refilled their coffee cups for the 100th time, moving through the room like a ghost, so shy and quiet that powerful men didn't even register her presence. Just another invisible servant keeping the caffeine flowing while they argued about complex algorithms and sophisticated fraud schemes. What none of them knew, what Victor was about to discover, was that this terrified waitress with her eyes down and her voice barely above a whisper had already solved the mystery they couldn't crack, had seen the pattern they'd missed, had the answer that would save everything, and all it would take was 60 seconds of courage to change her entire life. Hit that like, as in 60 seconds will prove that real brilliance comes from observation, not education, and change your entire life. Victor Constantine was 52 years old and had built his empire from absolutely nothing. Started as a teenager running numbers in Chicago's South Side and clawed his way to controlling vast territory that stretched across 3 states. His legitimate businesses were impressive: real estate developments and import companies and restaurant chains that generated massive legal profit. But everyone who mattered knew Victor's real power came from the less legal operations he'd spent 30 years perfecting. He was respected because he was smart, feared because he was ruthless, successful because he understood that intelligence mattered more than violence in building something that lasted. The past 6 months had been hell, money disappearing from his accounts in amounts that started small but grew exponentially, not obvious theft, but surgical bleeding that someone was executing with terrifying precision. Victor's people investigated first. His most trusted accountants and security experts found nothing but dead ends and covered tracks. He hired forensic accountants from New York, specialists who'd crack cases for federal prosecutors. They worked for 3 weeks and produced a report that essentially said someone brilliant was stealing, but they couldn't identify who or how. Tech experts came next, cybersecurity specialists who charged obscene fees and promised results. 2 weeks later, they admitted defeat. Whoever was doing this understood systems better than they did. Victor was losing millions, losing face, losing the control that defined his entire existence. So he did what he always did when normal solutions failed. He assembled the absolute best and locked them in a room until they solved it. 20 financial experts, each one a legend in their field, forensic accountants and fraud investigators and data analysts whose credentials filled walls, flown in from across the country and offered blank checks to find his traitor. 3 days ago, Victor put them in the private conference room at Bellissimo, the upscale Italian restaurant he partly owned, gave them complete access to every record and account and system, told them nobody left until they had answers. 72 hours later, they had nothing but exhaustion and theories that contradicted each other. Brilliant minds spinning in circles while Victor's empire continued bleeding. Maya Torres was 26 and had been invisible her entire life. The kind of person who moved through the world apologizing for existing. Speaking so quietly people asked her to repeat herself constantly. She worked part-time at Bellissimo serving tables, barely making enough to cover rent in the tiny apartment she shared with 2 roommates. Putting herself through community college 1 class at a time because a full course load was financially impossible. Her dreams were modest: finish her business administration degree, maybe get an office job somewhere, escape the endless cycle of serving entitled customers who looked through her like she was furniture. What nobody knew, what Maya had never told anyone, was that her mind worked differently than normal people. She had photographic memory that recorded conversations perfectly and pattern recognition that saw connections others missed. She read constantly, taught herself financial analysis and accounting principles from library books and free online courses, studied business journals while her roommates watched reality television, absorbed information like a sponge absorbing water. Her shyness wasn't stupidity, It was survival mechanism learned from a childhood where speaking up got you hurt, where being noticed meant being targeted, where invisibility was safety. Maya had learned early that smart girls from poor families who spoke their minds got crushed. So she made herself small, made herself quiet, made herself disappear while her mind grew sharper and more observant with each passing year. She served coffee to executives and businessmen, listened to their conversations without meaning to, remembered everything without trying, built a database in her head of how powerful people operated that no business school could teach. The manager chose Maya to serve Victor's emergency meeting specifically because she was invisible, because she moved quietly and efficiently without drawing attention, because important men conducting sensitive business wanted servants who didn't exist as humans. Just keep the coffee flowing, stay invisible, don't speak unless spoken to. The manager's instructions were clear, and Maya followed them perfectly like she always did. She entered that conference room terrified, intimidated by the concentration of power and money, by the expensive suits and the dangerous reputation of Victor Constantine, whose name everyone in Chicago knew and feared. 20 experts sat around the massive table looking defeated. Victor at the head, radiating controlled fury. His inner circle present, including Nikolai, his second in command, and Sergei, his head of security. Everyone desperate for the solution that kept evading them. Maya poured coffee with hands that trembled slightly, tried to be invisible like the manager wanted, tried not to hear the conversations happening around her. But her mind wouldn't cooperate, couldn't help cataloging the numbers they discussed, the account codes they referenced, the time frames they analyzed, her photographic memory recording everything automatically. The lead expert was presenting findings to Victor, his voice exhausted and defensive. We've analyzed every transaction across 3 years of records, examined every account and every transfer. The money is definitely disappearing, but the trail is perfectly covered. Whoever's doing this is brilliant beyond anything we've encountered. Victor's patience was visibly fraying, his voice cold and controlled in the way that meant violence was close to the surface. I didn't pay you to tell me what I already know, he said quietly, his tone making the expert flinch. I paid you to find who's stealing from me, to identify the traitor bleeding my empire. That's your only job, and you're failing. The expert stammered something about complexity and multiple perpetrators, about sophisticated schemes that required extraordinary access and skill, other experts chiming in with their theories that all led absolutely nowhere. Meyer refilled cups and tried to disappear, but something in the conversation was triggering recognition in her mind, something familiar about the accounts they mentioned, the patterns they described. She'd served this group before, multiple times over the past few months. Victor held regular meetings here because the owner guaranteed privacy and discretion. Maya's memory was pulling up fragments, conversations she'd overheard while being invisible, numbers and codes mentioned casually by men who didn't think servants had ears or brains. 3 months ago, she'd served a smaller meeting, Victor and Nikolai and a few accountants, discussing quarterly transfers and special project accounts. Nikolai's voice explaining some restructuring that needed to happen. 2 months ago, another meeting. Different people, but Nikolai present again, mentioning security windows and timing for sensitive operations, his tone casual like he was discussing whether or not potential crimes. Last month, Maya had been refilling water in the hallway outside the same room. Heard Nikolai on his phone speaking quietly, but not quietly enough, talking about transfers scheduled for Tuesday, about code sequences that stayed consistent, about accounts that matched exactly what these experts were discussing now. The pieces clicked together in Maya's mind with crystalline clarity, the pattern suddenly obvious now that she saw it whole. Nikolai had access to everything, knowledge of all systems, trust that nobody questioned. He'd been mentioning these exact accounts for months while everyone assumed his loyalty was absolute. It was so obvious it hurt. The perfect inside man hiding in plain sight because nobody looked at the people they trusted, everyone searching for sophisticated external threats while the traitor sat in the room with them. Maya's hands shook worse, pouring Victor's coffee, her mind racing with the realization, knowing she had the answer they'd searched 3 days for but terrified to speak. She was just a waitress, just a shy nobody with community college credits and a minimum wage job, who would listen to her accusations against Victor's most trusted advisor, who would believe her over 20 credentialed experts. The safe choice was silence. Finish serving and leave. Let them figure it out eventually or not. Stay invisible and stay safe like she'd learned to do her entire life. But something in Maya rebelled against that programming, against the idea that intelligence didn't matter without credentials, that observation was worthless without authority, that truth should stay hidden because speaking it was scary. Victor slammed his hand on the table, the sound making everyone jump, his fury finally breaking through his control. 3 days, he said, his voice deadly quiet. 20 experts, hundreds of thousands in fees, and you have nothing, absolutely nothing except theories and excuses. The experts flinched, tried to offer more explanations, more sophisticated analysis, more reasons why this was impossible to solve. Maya was backing toward the door, wanting to escape before the situation exploded into violence. But Victor's eyes caught her movement, noticed her trembling hands and the expression on her face that she couldn't quite control. You, he said, not loudly, but everyone heard. You look terrified. Are you okay? Maya froze, every instinct screaming to run, to apologize, to disappear like she was supposed to. Yes, sir. I'm fine. Her voice barely audible. I'm sorry for disturbing you. But Victor was still watching her, his intelligence reading her face like a book, seeing something beyond fear in her expression. You've been here the whole time, he said, not questioning, just confirming. You heard everything we discussed. Maya nodded slightly, couldn't lie to direct question, couldn't make herself disappear when he was looking right at her. You understand what we're talking about. Victor continued, financial analysis, account structures, transfer protocols. Another small nod, Maya wanting the floor to open and swallow her, feeling every eye in the room turning her direction. Victor leaned forward, his entire focus on this trembling waitress who looked like she might pass out from fear. You know something, he said, statement, not question, absolute certainty in his voice. You notice something we missed, I can see in your face. Maya shook her head frantically. I'm just a waitress. I don't know anything about this. Please, I should go. But Victor stood, walked around the table toward her, his presence overwhelming, dangerous and intelligent, and completely focused. You do know something? He said quietly. You've been listening and you saw a pattern. Tell me what you noticed. The entire room was staring now. 20 experts looking offended and curious. Nikolai watching with neutral expression that didn't quite hide tension. Everyone wondering what this nobody waitress could possibly contribute. Maya's mind was screaming contradictory things. Stay silent, it's safer. Speak up, it's right. Run away, stand your ground, terror and courage fighting for control. Victor stopped in front of her, his voice gentler now, but still commanding. Whatever you think you know, tell me. No judgment, no consequences, just truth. Maya looked at him and saw something unexpected. Genuine interest, actual willingness to listen, like her words might matter despite who she was. She took a shaking breath, closed her eyes because looking at everyone was impossible, whispered so quietly Victor had to lean in to hear. The accounts being emptied, the ones you keep mentioning, I've heard them before, heard them referenced in previous meetings over the past few months. Victor's eyes sharpened immediately, his body going still in the way that meant his complete attention. When, where, who mentioned them? Maya's eyes stayed closed, accessing her photographic memory, pulling up exact details. 3 months ago, small meeting, discussion about quarterly transfers and special project restructuring. Those exact account numbers were mentioned as needing attention. Who mentioned them? Victor repeated, his voice harder now. Who specifically? Maya's eyes flicked open briefly, involuntarily looked at Nikolai, looked away just as fast, but not fast enough. Victor saw the direction of her glance. The room went absolutely silent, dangerous silence that preceded violence. Everyone understanding something fundamental had just shifted. Keep going, Victor said, still quiet, but his voice had edges now. What else do you remember? 2 months ago, Maya continued, her voice steadier now that she'd started. Different meeting, but Nikolai was there again, talking about security windows and timing for transfers, mentioning vulnerabilities in the system. Last month, Maya's words coming faster now. Fear being replaced by the relief of finally speaking truth. I was refilling water in the hallway. Heard Nikolai on his phone. He was discussing transfers scheduled for Tuesday. Code sequences staying consistent. Account numbers that match exactly what you've been investigating. Victor turned slowly to face Nikolai, his second in command of 15 years, his trusted friend and advisor, the man who knew every secret and controlled vast portions of his empire. Nikolai was still sitting, still neutral, but something in his posture had changed, calculation visible behind his eyes. This is ridiculous, Nikolai said, his voice reasonable and calm. You're listening to a waitress making things up, trying to cause trouble or get attention. Victor held up his hand, silencing Nikolai without looking at him, his eyes still on Maya, who was trembling but standing her ground. The accounts she mentioned, he said to the lead expert, do they match the ones being emptied? The expert pulled up his laptop quickly, cross-referenced the account numbers Maya had recited from memory against their analysis, his face going pale as he confirmed. Yes, those exact accounts, exact time frames she described, transfers that happen on Tuesdays, just like she said, code sequences that match her description perfectly. 20 experts in the room, hundreds of years of combined experience, and none of them had thought to look at the trusted insider. None of them had listened to casual conversations about accounts. None of them had connected dots that seemed obvious now that Maya laid them out. Victor turned back to Nikolai, his expression transforming from fury to something colder and more dangerous. The look that had built his reputation on the streets before he became legitimate businessman. Empty your pockets, he said quietly. Show me your phones, all of them. Nikolai hesitated, his mind clearly calculating options and outcomes, considering whether to run or fight or try to talk his way out. Security had moved to block the exits, Sergei looking like he wanted to kill Nikolai himself, betrayal written across his face, because Nikolai had been his mentor and friend. Don't make this worse, Victor said, his voice still quiet. You've already destroyed 15 years of trust, already proven yourself a traitor. At least have the courage to face it directly. Nikolai pulled out two phones, his regular one and a hidden burner he'd kept in an inner pocket, handed them to Victor with hands that finally showed tremor. Victor scrolled through the burner, his face darkening with each message he read. Evidence of every theft, every betrayal, communications with offshore accounts and rival organizations, plans to undermine and eventually take over once Victor was weakened enough. The room watched in silence as Victor's oldest friendship died in real time, as 15 years of loyalty revealed itself as 15 years of patient planning. You weren't just stealing, Victor said, his voice dead calm. You were selling information, undermining operations, positioning to take everything once I was destroyed. Nikolai finally dropped the pretense, his expression changing to something harder, something honest for the first time. You're getting old, soft, he said, no apology in his voice. Someone had a position for the future. I spent 15 years watching and waiting and preparing. Would have worked perfectly if not for her. He looked at Maya with hatred that made her shrink back, made her remember why being invisible was safer, but Victor stepped between them. Don't even look at her, he said, his voice dropping to something that promised violence. She's worth 10 of you. She had courage you'll never understand, spoke truth when it was terrifying. That's real strength, not the coward's betrayal you chose. Victor turned back to the 20 experts who'd spent 3 days failing, his expression mixing disgust with cold calculation. 2 years passed in a blur of success and transformation. Maya rising through Victor's organization faster than anyone in company history. Her title changing from analyst to senior analyst to director of financial oversight. Each promotion earned through consistent brilliance that nobody could question anymore. She was 30 now, responsible for a team of 12 analysts, overseeing all financial analysis for Victor's legitimate empire. Her insights saving the company millions by identifying inefficiencies and preventing fraud before it started. The shy waitress was gone, replaced by a confident executive who still observed everything but now spoke with authority that demanded attention. Her voice no longer whispered but clear and certain because she'd learned her intelligence had value. Her relationship with Alexei had strengthened too, They'd moved in together after a year of dating, talked seriously about marriage and children, built partnership that worked both personally and professionally because they respected each other's abilities completely. Alexei ran the operations division, while Maya handled all financial oversight. Power couple within Victor's organization. Both successful in their own right, both valued for different skills that complemented rather than competed. But Maya never forgot where she came from, never lost the humility that came from years of being invisible. She created a scholarship fund for community college students working service jobs while studying, wanted to help others like her who had intelligence but not opportunity. Victor matched her contribution dollar for dollar, proud of who she'd become, the woman who'd save his empire twice now, becoming someone who helped others find their own paths. Maya's life felt impossibly good. Everything she dreamed about during those years, serving coffee, now reality, she lived daily. The struggle and poverty and invisibility replaced by comfort and respect and genuine happiness. Then the federal investigation started, IRS and FBI coordinating, multiple agencies suddenly interested in Victor's business empire, subpoenas arriving for records and interviews. Everyone in the organization terrified, because federal attention usually meant someone was going to prison. Victor called emergency meeting of all executives, his face showing stress Maya had never seen before. The confident man who controlled everything suddenly facing threat he couldn't intimidate or eliminate. We have a problem, he said without preamble. Federal prosecutors believe they can connect our current legitimate businesses to criminal operations from years ago. They're building a case that everything we do now is just sophisticated money laundering, that the transformation to legal business was a cover, not a genuine change. The room absorbed this information in heavy silence, everyone understanding that federal prosecution meant years in prison, meant destruction of everything they'd built, meant the end of careers and lives and futures. Victor's lawyers were already working on defense strategy, corporate attorneys who specialized in white-collar crime, but their preliminary assessment wasn't encouraging. The evidence is complicated, the lead lawyer explained. Years of intermingled operations where legal and illegal were mixed together, separating them clearly enough to prove current legitimacy is extremely difficult. The prosecutors are experienced and motivated. They think this case will make their careers. What's our strategy? Victor asked, his voice controlled, but tension visible in his shoulders. We defend, the lawyer said. We show that current operations are completely clean, that you've built legitimate business that generates real profit through legal means. We emphasize the transformation and distance ourselves from the past. Weeks of preparation followed, accountants pulling records, lawyers crafting arguments, everyone working frantically to build a defense that felt increasingly weak. Maya reviewed everything, her analytical mind working through the prosecution's likely strategy, seeing the pattern in what they were investigating. They're focused on the wrong time frame, she realized, looking at recent years when everything was already legitimate. They're missing the actual transition period when criminal operations shut down and legal businesses ramped up. They're assuming the change was sudden and fake when it was gradual and genuine. She sat in on strategy sessions, watching lawyers prepare presentations that felt too defensive, too reactive, too focused on proving negatives instead of demonstrating positives. The approach was wrong. Maya could feel it. They were letting prosecutors control the narrative, fighting on ground that favored the government, losing before they even started. One evening, after a particularly frustrating strategy meeting, Maya stayed late reviewing everything again, her mind working through the problem from different angles, seeing solutions the lawyers hadn't considered because they were thinking like lawyers, not like storytellers. She requested a meeting with Victor the next morning, brought Alexei, because she wanted his operational perspective, laid out her idea that was radically different from what the legal team proposed. Stop defending, she said, her voice confident despite proposing complete strategy change. Stop trying to prove you're not still criminal. Instead, show them the transformation. Document the deliberate choice to go legitimate. Prove this wasn't hiding, but changing fundamentally. Victor leaned forward, his attention completely focused. Explain what you mean. Maya pulled up the presentation she'd built overnight. Timeline showing criminal operations systematically shutting down over 5 years. Legal businesses ramping up with massive investment in legitimate infrastructure, hiring compliance officers, and implementing oversight systems, not covering tracks, but building entirely new foundation. You didn't hide your past, she explained, clicking through slides that told story instead of defending against accusations. You acknowledged it and chose differently. Show them that choice. Show them the decision points where you could have continued criminal operations but deliberately didn't. Prove the transformation was real by documenting how much it cost you in short-term profit. The lawyers were skeptical when Victor brought them Maya's proposal, concerned about acknowledging past crimes, worried about giving prosecutors ammunition. But Maya pushed back with unusual force. They already know the past, she argued. Pretending it didn't happen makes you look dishonest. Acknowledging it and showing genuine change makes you look human, someone who chose to be better. Juries and prosecutors respond to redemption narratives. Give them one that's backed by overwhelming evidence. Victor listened to both sides, his strategic mind evaluating options, finally deciding to trust the woman who'd saved him before. We do it Maya's way, he announced, his voice final. She's been right about patterns twice now. I'm betting she's right about this too. Maya restructured the entire presentation, created narrative of transformation backed by meticulous documentation, showed criminal operations shutting down one by one, legal businesses growing to replace them, investment in legitimate infrastructure totaling tens of millions, employment of compliance experts, and implementation of oversight systems years before the investigation started. She documented every decision point, every choice toward legitimacy, created story of redemption that was undeniable because the numbers proved it real. Not sudden change when investigation started, but gradual transformation over 5 years, deliberate and expensive and genuine. The presentation took weeks to perfect, Maya working late every night, Alexei helping with operational details, Victor providing insight into decisions that had driven the transformation. When it was ready, Maya felt confident in ways that surprised her, confident enough to request presenting it herself to federal prosecutors. The lawyers were horrified, wanted experienced litigators handling it, but Victor supported Maya's request. She built this, he said firmly. She understands it better than anyone. She presents it or we don't present it all. The meeting was scheduled, federal prosecutors agreeing to hear their proactive presentation, 3 senior attorneys and 2 FBI agents sitting across for Victor, Maya, and their legal team. Maya stood at the head of the table, her hand steady despite knowing everything depended on the next hour, began walking through the presentation she'd built. I'm not here to deny Victor Constantine's past, she said clearly, her voice carrying authority that made the prosecutors lean forward. He built his original empire through criminal operations. That's documented and undeniable. I'm here to show you that 5 years ago, he made a choice, a deliberate, expensive, genuine choice to transform that empire into something completely legitimate. She clicked through the timeline, showing operations shutting down, showing the revenue loss that proved these weren't profitable moves, showing investment in legal business that cost vastly more than maintaining criminal operations would have. This wasn't covering tracks, Maya continued, clicking to show compliance, hiring, and system implementation. This was building entirely new foundation, hiring experts to ensure legitimacy, implementing oversight that made hiding illegal activity impossible, spending money and effort that only makes sense if the goal was genuine transformation. The prosecutors were skeptical, asking pointed questions about timing and motivation, suggesting this was sophisticated cover for continued criminal operations. Maya had anticipated every question, had answers backed by documentation, showed that the transformation started years before any federal interest, that the motivation was Victor's age and desire for legitimate legacy, that the cost proved sincerity because criminals don't spend millions to appear legal. They spend thousands to hide illegal. Hours passed, Maya fielding questions with calm confidence, her preparation evident in how smoothly she handled challenges, her intelligence obvious in how she connected disparate facts into coherent narrative. The prosecutors asked for time to review her documentation, to verify her claims, to cross-check against their own investigation. Take all the time you need, Maya said, meeting the lead prosecutor's eyes directly. Everything I've shown you is verifiable. Talk to former associates. Examine the financial records. You'll find the transformation is exactly as documented, genuine and deliberate and complete. Weeks of tense waiting followed. Federal investigators interviewing former associates, examining financial records in detail, cross-referencing everything against Maya's presentation. Victor tried to maintain normal operations, but stress was visible, understanding that his freedom depended on whether prosecutors believed the story Maya had told. Alexei watched Maya handle the pressure with composure that amazed him, watched her continue working normally while knowing everything hung in balance. Her confidence never wavering because she knew the evidence supported her narrative completely. Finally, the call came, prosecutors requesting final meeting, their tone giving nothing away. Victor, Maya, and their legal team gathered again in the same conference room, federal attorneys entering with expressions that Maya couldn't read. We've completed our verification, the lead prosecutor said, her voice professionally neutral, interviewed dozens of former associates, examined 5 years of financial records, cross-checked against multiple databases and sources. The pause felt eternal, everyone holding breath, waiting for verdict that would determine Victor's future. Your presentation was accurate. The prosecutor continued. The transformation appears to be genuine. The timeline matches exactly as you documented. The investment in legitimate business and compliance infrastructure is verified. The shutdown of criminal operations is confirmed by multiple independent sources. She looked directly at Victor, her expression softening slightly. Mr. Constantine, this office has decided not to pursue indictment. Our investigation found evidence of past criminal activity, but also clear evidence of deliberate transformation. We're satisfied that your current operations are legitimate. This investigation is officially closed. The relief in the room was overwhelming. Victor's shoulders dropping tension he'd carried for months. Lawyers congratulating each other. Everyone understanding they'd just avoided disaster. But the lead prosecutor wasn't finished, her eyes moving to Maya now. Ms. Torres, your presentation was the most compelling I've seen in 20 years of prosecution. You didn't defend, you told a story that evidence supported completely, that took strategic thinking most defense attorneys never achieve. Maya felt pride warming her chest, felt vindication for the approach the lawyers had doubted, felt confidence growing that she'd saved Victor's empire for the third time now. That evening, Victor hosted celebration dinner for the core team, intimate gathering at an upscale restaurant that felt surreal to Maya, who'd served in places like this not long ago. You saved us, Victor said, raising his glass in toast. The lawyers built defense, but you built the case that won. You saw what they missed, you told story they couldn't refute. You're the reason we're free. Everyone toasted Maya, genuine appreciation in their faces, understanding that her unconventional approach had succeeded where traditional defense would have failed. But Victor wasn't done, had one more surprise that made Maya's breath catch. I'm promoting you to Chief Financial Officer, he announced, his voice carrying pride. Second most powerful position in this company. You've earned it 1,000 times over. You've saved this organization 3 times now. You've proven yourself beyond any possible doubt. CFO, Maya repeated, barely able to process it. The shy waitress who'd been invisible 3 years ago, now second in command of a massive business empire. The transformation so complete it felt like a dream. Later that night, private dinner with just Maya, Alexei, and Victor. Alexei stood suddenly, his face showing nervousness that Maya had never seen. I was in a wait, he said, his voice unsteady, planned something elaborate and romantic, but tonight feels right, feels perfect. He dropped to one knee, pulled out a ring box, Maya's heart stopping because she knew what was coming. Maya Torres, you're the most extraordinary person I've ever met, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You're brilliant and courageous, and you've transformed everything you've touched, including me. Will you marry me, build a life together, continue being amazing together? Maya was crying before he finished, nodding because words wouldn't come. Yes, escaping in a whisper that grew to a shout. Yes, absolutely yes, I'll marry you. Victor watched with expression of pure joy. This man who'd seen so much violence and betrayal getting to witness love and commitment, getting to see his nephew and his best executive building something real. He raised his glass again, voice rough with emotion. To Maya, he said simply, the woman who sees what others miss, who speaks when it's terrifying, who saves empires and builds futures. You've changed all our lives for the better. I'm honored to call you family. The wedding was planned for 6 months later, time to do it properly, to celebrate the union that made sense to everyone who knew them. Maya continued working, continued proving why Victor's faith was justified, continued building reputation as the most insightful financial mind in the organization. But she also planned her future, thought about children and family and legacy beyond business success, thought about teaching her future kids the lessons she'd learned about courage and observation and speaking truth despite fear. Alexei was equally invested, equally excited, both of them building something that felt permanent and real. Then, 3 months before the wedding, security reported something that made everyone's blood run cold. Nikolai had been spotted in Chicago. The traitor Victor had exiled 3 years ago had returned, violating the agreement that kept him alive. Victor received the news with cold fury. The man who'd shown mercy, once understanding that mercy misplaced became weakness exploited. Bring him to me, Victor ordered, his voice deadly calm. Tonight, we finish what should have been finished years ago. No more chances, no more mercy, just consequences. Maya heard about Nikolai's return during a late meeting, saw Victor's expression transform from contemplative to predatory, watched him make calls that everyone recognized meant violence was coming. She felt fear not for herself, but for what this would do to Victor, to the legitimacy they'd fought so hard to establish, to the future they'd built on choosing better paths. Alexei squeezed her hand under the table, both understanding that tonight would test whether Victor's transformation was complete or if old patterns would resurface when pushed hard enough. Nikolai's brought to the same warehouse where he'd been confronted 3 years ago, Victor arriving with security and key members of his inner circle, the traitor looking worse than anyone remembered, 3 years of exile having aged him decades. Victor stood before Nikolai with expression that made everyone present grateful they weren't on the receiving end, his voice quiet but carrying edges that promised pain. I gave you mercy, he said, each word precise and cold. Gave you money and time and the chance to disappear, to build something elsewhere, to learn from your betrayal and become better. Nikolai tried to speak, but Victor's raised hand silenced him with authority that needed no volume. You violated that mercy, came back to the city I told you to avoid. We're watching my businesses, planning something stupid that would end with you dead. Except now I have a different problem because I'm trying to be legitimate and corpses complicate that goal. Maya was watching from the shadows with Alexei, insisted on being present because she understood patterns and wanted to see how this resolved, whether Victor would revert to old methods or find new solutions. Nikolai finally spoke, his voice desperate and bitter. I had nothing, nowhere to go. You took everything from me, left me with no options except coming back or dying on the streets. Victor's expression showed zero sympathy, cold calculation replacing any trace of former friendship. You had the option of not betraying me in the first place, he replied, had 15 years of loyalty that would have given you everything legitimately. You chose to steal and betray and destroy trust. Those consequences are yours, not mine. Nikolai switched tactics, tried playing on old friendship that had died years ago. We were brothers once, he said, his voice cracking with false emotion. Doesn't that count for anything? Can't you find in yourself to give me another chance? Victor laughed, harsh sound without humor, and it was more frightening than his anger. Brothers don't steal from brothers, he said. Don't sell out brothers to enemies. Don't spend years planning brothers' destruction. You killed our brotherhood when you made your choices. I'm just finishing what you started. Nikolai's face showed he understood begging was pointless, showed calculation about whether fighting might somehow improve his situation. Don't, Victor said, reading his thoughts with the perception that had built his empire. You fight and my men kill you before you take 2 steps. You try to run and the outcome is identical, except that this ends badly because you earned that ending. Maya stepped forward then, surprising everyone, including herself, her voice cutting through the tension. Victor, can I speak with you privately for a moment? Victor's eyes found hers across the warehouse, saw something in her expression that made him nod, followed her to a corner away from Nikolai and the others. What are you thinking? She asked quietly. What happens to Nikolai tonight? What he deserves, Victor replied, his voice still cold. Permanent solution to a problem that should have been handled this way 3 years ago. I was weak then, showed mercy to someone who interpreted it as permission to try again. Maya chose her words carefully, understanding she was intervening in something dangerous, but unable to stay silent. Killing him makes you exactly what the prosecutor suspected, she said, makes the transformation a lie, proves you're still the criminal who solves problems with violence. Everything we built, everything I presented to federal investigators, it becomes fiction if you do this. Victor's jaw tightened, frustration visible in his face because Maya was right and he knew it. He violated the agreement, he said, his voice defensive, came back when I explicitly told him not to. What am I supposed to do? Let him keep trying until he succeeds. There are other ways, Maya insisted. Legal ways that don't make you a killer, ways that keep you on the path you've chosen, the better path, the legitimate path. What other ways? Victor demanded, his patience fraying. What legal solution handles a man who's already proven mercy doesn't work on him? Maya had been thinking about this since she'd heard Nikolai was back, her strategic mind working through options that didn't require violence. He's violated his exile agreement. She said that's stalking and harassment under the law. He's been watching your businesses, which is corporate espionage. He's a convicted felon based on his past crimes, which means he's not supposed to be in Illinois at all. Call the police. Let the system handle him the way it's supposed to. Victor stared at her, like she'd suggested he fly to the moon. His entire worldview, not including police, as solution to problems. You want me to call the cops? He said slowly. Involve law enforcement in my business. Trust the system to handle something important. Yes, Maya replied firmly, because that's what legitimate businessmen do when threatened. They use law, not violence. They trust systems, not guns. You want a transformation? Victor, this is what it looks like, choosing the harder path because it's the right one. They argued quietly for 10 minutes. Victor's old instincts fighting against Maya's logic, his desire for immediate violent solution battling against his commitment to genuine change. Finally, he pulled out his phone, made a call that shocked everyone who heard it, requesting police response to his location, reporting an individual with outstanding warrants who was violating court order restrictions. The police arrived 20 minutes later, ran Nikolai's information, found exactly what Maya had predicted: outstanding warrants, parole violations, restraining order violations, enough charges to ensure significant prison time. They arrested Nikolai while Victor watched, the man who'd once solved all problems with violence, now using the legal system like any other citizen. Maya saw the struggle on Victor's face, saw him fighting every instinct to end this his way, saw him choosing better path because she'd asked him to, because transformation required uncomfortable choices, because being different meant acting different even when it was harder. After police left with Nikolai, Victor turned to Maya with expression mixing frustration and respect. You cost me satisfaction, he said, but his voice carried acknowledgement, not anger. I wanted to end him myself. Wanted him to know I was the one who destroyed him. You took that from me. I gave you something better, Maya replied. Proof that your transformation is real, that you're not the man you used to be, that the story I told prosecutors was truth, not convenient fiction. Nikolai's go to prison through the system. That's justice, not murder. That's who you are now. 3 months later, Maya and Alexei were married in a ceremony that felt like celebration of more than just their union, felt like acknowledgement of transformation and redemption and choosing better paths. The venue was elegant but not ostentatious. Guests were business associates and family and friends, people who'd watched Maya's journey from invisible waitress to powerful executive. Victor walked Maya down the aisle because her father had died when she was young, his face showing pride that made Maya's eyes water. This dangerous man who'd become something like family, who'd given her every opportunity, who'd trusted her intelligence when no one else saw it. The vows were personal and honest. Alexei promising to support Maya's ambitions, to value her intelligence, to build partnership based on equality and respect. Maya promising to love all of him, to be partner in everything, to continue growing together. Victor watched from the front row, emotion visible on his face. The nephew he loved marrying the woman who'd save his empire, building something real and good from foundation of second chances and transformation. The reception was joyful, dancing and laughter and celebration that felt earned. People who'd struggled and changed and become better gathering to witness love that had survived complications and built something lasting. Years passed in steady success and happiness. Maya and Alexei building life together that included two children, a daughter named Sophia and a son named James, both inheriting their parents' intelligence and their grandfather Victor's strategic thinking. Maya became CEO when Victor finally retired at 65, first woman to run the empire he'd built, transforming it further in a model of legitimate business that was ranked among most ethical companies in the region. From criminal roots to corporate excellence, the journey complete because people had chosen differently, had valued transformation over tradition, had believed change was possible. Maya never forgot the moment that had changed everything, standing in that conference room terrified, knowing the answer 20 experts had missed, choosing courage over safety for 60 seconds. She taught her children about that moment, about the importance of speaking truth despite fear, about how observation mattered more than credentials, about how intelligence existed everywhere if people paid attention. Pay attention to what others miss, she told Sophia and James during bedtime stories. Remember what others forget. Speak up when you see truth, even if you're terrified, especially if you're terrified, because courage matters most when fear is loudest. Her story became legend in business circles. Articles written about the waitress who became CEO, who'd solved impossible problems through observation rather than education, who'd proven that brilliance wasn't limited to people with impressive degrees. Schools invited her to speak, young people from service jobs seeking advice. Maya always making time because she remembered being invisible, remembered feeling like her intelligence didn't matter, remembered thinking success was impossible for someone like her. You already have everything you need, she'd tell them. You have your mind and your observation and your courage. Use those things and opportunities will find you. Victor told the story often too, especially to young executives who thought credentials guaranteed success, about the 20 experts who'd failed and the waitress who'd succeeded in 60 seconds. Never underestimate quiet people, he'd say, his voice carrying the wisdom of age and experience. Never assume credentials equal intelligence. Never stop listening to everyone regardless of their position. The woman who saved my empire was invisible when I needed her most, visible only because I paid attention when she spoke. Best decision I ever made, trusting the shy waitress who saw patterns everyone else missed. Maya's scholarship fund grew into full foundation, supporting hundreds of students who worked service jobs while studying, giving them opportunities she'd once desperately needed. Victor contributed millions to the foundation, proud of how Maya used her success to help others, proud of the woman she'd become and the legacy she was building. The foundation's motto came from Maya's story: 60 seconds of courage can change everything. Words that inspired students to speak up, to trust their intelligence, to believe their observations mattered regardless of their background or credentials. On Maya's 35th birthday, celebration at the home she and Alexei had built, surrounded by family and friends and colleagues, Victor stood to make a toast. 15 years ago, he said, his voice still strong despite his age, I had a crisis I couldn't solve. 20 experts failed me completely. Then a terrified waitress solved it in less than a minute. He looked at Maya with affection that made her tear up. That waitress became my best analyst. Then my CFO. Then my CEO. She saved my empire 3 times. She transformed my life. She proved that real brilliance comes from observation and courage, not from degrees and credentials. He raised his glass higher, emotion thick in his voice. Maya Torres taught me that transformation is possible, that people can change fundamentally, that choosing better paths matters more than following easy ones. She made me better, made this organization better, made everyone around her better by example and expectation. He looked around the room at all the faces watching. If you learn nothing else from Maya's story, learn this: 60 seconds of courage can transform everything. Speaking up when terrified can change lives. Trusting your intelligence matters more than anyone's validation. Maya stood, hugged Victor with tears streaming down her face. This man who'd seen her when she was invisible, who'd trusted her intelligence when she doubted it herself, who'd given her every opportunity to become who she was meant to be. Thank you, she whispered, for listening to me that day, for taking a chance on a terrified waitress, for changing my life completely. You changed mine, Victor replied, his voice rough with emotion. You, in your 60 seconds of courage, saved everything I'd built, gave me family I didn't know I needed, showed me that redemption was possible. I'm the one who should be thanking you. They stood there while the party continued around them. The Mafia boss who'd become legitimate businessman, and the waitress who'd become CEO, two people who transformed each other through trust and courage and choosing better paths. Maya thought about the journey, from serving coffee while invisible to running an empire while respected, from terrified silence to confident voice, from believing her intelligence didn't matter to proving it mattered more than credentials or education or anything except courage to speak. Sophia and James ran up, pulling their mother toward the cake, their laughter filling the air with joy that felt earned, that felt like the culmination of every choice that had led here. Maya looked around at her life, at her husband and children and career and foundation, at Victor who'd become family, at the success built from observation and courage, at the legacy growing from 60 seconds of speaking when silence would have been safer. This was the life she dreamed about while serving coffee to people who didn't see her. The life she'd built by trusting her intelligence and speaking her truth. The life that proved transformation was possible for everyone brave enough to try. Years continued in happiness and purpose. Maya's children growing with advantages she'd never had, but with the same values of observation and courage and speaking truth. Victor lived to see his great-grandchildren, passed away at 73, surrounded by family. His final words to Maya, a simple thank you for saving him in every way that mattered. The company thrived under Maya's leadership, grew into international corporation that maintained its ethical standards, that valued intelligence over credentials, that created opportunities for overlooked talent, that proved legitimate business could be more successful than criminal enterprise. Maya's story was told and retold, inspiring countless others to trust their observations, to speak despite fear, to believe their intelligence mattered regardless of background. The foundation she'd built supported thousands of students, many of whom went on to remarkable success, many of whom credited Maya's example with giving them courage to pursue opportunities they'd thought impossible. 60 seconds of courage became a movement, a reminder that transformation started with small, brave choices, that speaking up mattered, that intelligence deserved recognition wherever it appeared. On Maya's 50th birthday, interviewed for a documentary about her remarkable life, asked what she wanted people to remember about her story. Remember that brilliance hides everywhere, she said, her voice still carrying the quiet strength that had defined her, often in people society overlooks, the ones serving coffee or cleaning offices or working jobs considered beneath notice. Everyone has intelligence. Everyone sees patterns. The question is whether they have courage to speak and whether anyone has wisdom to listen. She paused, thinking back to that terrified 26-year-old in the conference room. I was invisible for most of my life, she continued. Society taught me my observations didn't matter, that my lack of credentials meant my intelligence was worthless. But Victor Constantine listened when I finally found courage to speak. He gave me opportunity that transformed everything. She looked directly at the camera. If my story teaches anything, let it teach this. Listen to quiet people. Value observation over education. Give opportunities to those who earn them through intelligence, not those who buy them through privilege. And if you're the quiet person with observations nobody hears, find your 60 seconds of courage. Speak your truth. Change your life. The documentary ended with footage of Maya's life, from the waitress serving coffee to the CEO running an empire, from invisible to respected, from terrified silence to confident voice, proving that transformation was possible. That courage mattered. That 60 seconds could change everything. Maya Torres's legacy wasn't just the company she built or the money she made or the position she achieved. It was the inspiration she provided, the proof that intelligence mattered more than credentials, that observation beat education, that courage transformed lives, that 60 seconds of speaking truth could build empires and change the world. If this story of hidden brilliance and courageous transformation moved, hit that notification bell because we're creating more powerful stories about people who prove intelligence comes from you would have done in Maya's position when she discovered the traitor. Share this with someone who needs to know their voice matters regardless of their background. Every view helps us spread the message that brilliance hides in unexpected places, and speaking up despite fear can change everything. Drop that like immediately. Our family of people who believe in recognizing talent wherever it appears and giving courage to those who doubt their own intelligence. You absolutely won't regret it because these stories prove that 60 seconds of courage can transform lives and build legacies that